Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you. I am Shubhendu Parth, editor of Business Transformation Asia, and your host for today's webinar on geospatial technologies. The webinar is part of the capacity building and information sharing initiative of GEC Media Group and Business Transformation Asia. It is an effort to bring experts from the industry to talk about new technology trends, latest developments, and CXO challenges, as also to provide how-to training sessions, strategy, and wellness programs. But before we begin the session, I have some housekeeping essentials to announce. Ladies and gentlemen, for the duration of the webinar, all participants will be on the listen-only mode. However, you will be able to send questions through the chat, and we will take it up depending upon the time available. As you are already aware, in February last, the Ministry of Science and Technology had released a new guidelines for the geospatial sector in India. The intent was to deregulate the existing protocols and liberalize the sector to make it more competitive by allowing active participation of the private sector. From an organizational perspective, it means that companies can now acquire and use locational data and geospatial data services, including maps, without any license or approval. And if we add to this the technology advancement, the deep tech, the shrinking size of sensors and IoT devices, the improving connectivity, including the upcoming 5G network. And we all can figure out that the location-based intelligence, how it will open up the floodgate of innovation. While the easing of norms will help several sectors like logistics, real estate developers, insurance, agriculture, that were earlier suffering because of non-availability of high-quality maps, it is also expected to drive private and public sector companies and start, the startups in other sectors to innovate, build new scalable solutions, and disrupt the market in a big way. In fact, reports indicate that India's geospatial economy, which is currently valued at around 38,972 crore, has the potential to touch around rupees 63,100 crore by 2025, which would be around 12.8% growth. The sector also has a huge employment potential. It presently employs over 470,000 people across the country and has the potential to generate additional 480,000 jobs in the next 4 years. So these are huge numbers that we are talking about. And the potential we have seen in the lockdown, how geospatial data has been used effectively for contact tracing and also for vaccination. So in today's session, we have with us 5 distinguished guests with a lot of experience in the space and information technology. And together we intend to explore and understand the impact of these policy changes in India, the new opportunities, and how businesses can benefit from the geospatial data and analytics. So without much ado, I'd like to begin the session and welcome our panelists for the day. May I request Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt, Director General of the newly set up Indian Space Association. Welcome, sir. And Lieutenant General Bhatt heads the Apex body that has been set up recently and aimed at serving the collective as the collective voice of Indian space industry. He has held leadership and management positions in the Indian Army and has been part of the defense services for over 38 years. He has headed numerous studies aimed at developing implementable solutions to complex challenges, and has also served twice as the principal staff officer to the Chief of Army Staff. We also have amongst us today Agendra Kumar, Managing Director, Esri, an industry veteran with over 3 decades of experience in the IT industry. Agendra has been promoting the use of geospatial technologies in the country for a long period. Under his leadership, ESRI India has partnered with various government and private organizations to execute critical and transformative projects using GIS technology. He has also been the president of the Association of Geospatial Industries in India. Welcome, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you.
We also have with us Mr. A.M. Parial, and I'd like to invite him, a former vice chairman of Chhattisgarh Information Promotion Society, or CHIPS as it is called. Mr. Parial is a technocrat bureaucrat with over 31 years of hands-on experience in IT applications for e-governance, smart cities. He's also a massive, long experience in electrical distribution, transmission, and generation systems, including SCADA, data acquisition systems, and IT security. He's been part of eGov initiatives in Chhattisgarh since its inception and has led several projects like CHOIS, GIS, eGram Suraj, CG Chhattisgarh Swan, and the State Data Center. He's also been a member of the State IT Task Force, which is responsible for designing the IT infrastructure and e-governance projects in the state, and been the information technology advisor to the Naya Raipur Development Authority. Welcome, Mr. Parial. We have with us Mr. Barry Nagel, CTO Up42, which is a geospatial company and on a mission to democratize access to Earth observation data and analytics. Barry is a technology enthusiast and loves to build products and businesses from ground up. And prior to his position as a CTO with Up42, he built new products and startups for multiple Fortune 500 companies and at BCGDV, serving various capacities as individual contributor, engineer lead, and venture CTO. He was also part of the team that set up Koo, an electric scooter ride-sharing company, and later went on to become its CTO. And last but not the least, we have Dr. Subrat N. Das, a scientist engineer with the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. Dr. Das is also the former director of Maharashtra State Remote Sensing Application Center and a senior scientist at National Remote Sensing Center. He has over 30 years of experience in the field of remote sensing and GIS. He initiated the Maharashtra Bhumi project in the state with very high resolution satellite data of 50 centimeters and created 2K base maps for the state. He has worked in areas of development of geoportals, customization and development of several software in GIS, and has been a member of various geospatial data development for GIS and data application. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking out time for this session today on geospatial technology, the new business driver. Welcome all. And without wasting much of time, I'd quickly move on to the panel discussion that we have in front of us and to discuss this important topic. And as we all know, one of the initiatives to accelerate development of India's space industry was the setting up of the Indian Space Association, ISpA. And as its first Director General, Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt is in the thick of the things. Lieutenant General Bhatt, how will you describe the change in policy for the space sector, particularly the setting up of the public sector NewSpace India Limited, NSIL, the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center in space, and also the ISpA? And we'd like to understand what role will these play in developing the geospatial economy and the ecosystem in India. Over to you, sir.
As you are aware, a historical decision was taken by the government in June 2020. And that was of privatization of space. Space, which has always been the domain of government and through ISRO, was now being opened to the entire private sector. Now, this led also to the creation of NSpace, NSIL, and the government issuing draft policies on remote sensing, space communication, and even deciding to now issue a new space activities bill. Now, coming to NSpace, firstly, what is NSpace? NSpace is the new organization which is supposed to authorize, promote, and regulate activities of private players in space. In fact, it has the responsibility to draw out manifests of what would be all flights, rocket flights, which would be taking over from India, and prioritizing it between for ISRO, for NSIL, and for the private players. And even remote sensing data, its issuance to private players, to other things, everything will be done through NSpace. Dr. Pawan Goenka, expert from the automotive industry, has been declared as its first chairman, and he is in the movement of creating this organization, because this organization would have a technical directorate, a legal directorate, a security and safety directorate, and a monitoring directorate. They are in the process of being made, basically to promote private industry. Now, NSIL, which is the NewSpace India Limited, would be the commercial arm of ISRO. And all satellite launches, all transfer of technologies, or even satellites which are launched by private players, and even facilities being made available to private players, it will be through this public sector undertaking of the ISRO. We are still looking at a little more clarity in its role as far as its interface with private sector goes. And thirdly is the formation of the Indian Space Association. This was an aftermath of what the government had decided. The Prime Minister advised industry players and startups to have an association for them to have a combined voice in the domain of space. We were fortunately inaugurated by the Prime Minister on 11th October. And there, where he has laid down that the government now onwards will be the enabler to allow industry to carry out innovation, for the nation to create the next crop of technical manpower, prepare our youth for the next century and for the space domain. And we in ISPA, we look at our role to enable the environment for the private sector in India, that we become a global players, lead global players in the space economy. And as you are aware, one very important policy as far as geospatial technology goes is the remote sensing policy draft, which they have had a discussion with industry. Aim is to open it to private players to have remote sensing satellites, as also to make data more easily available to all. This is what I would set in as what has happened in India. And we are just waiting keenly for this remote sensing policy to be in sync with the science and technology policy, which has already been, you have mentioned about, that it becomes more open for private players to use geospatial information, data for all business in India. We can't hear you.
You are on mute.
Sorry. So thank you, Lieutenant General Bhatt, for touching upon the three organizations, their roles, and how they'll be enabling the entire geospatial ecosystem, and also briefly touching upon the space RS policy, the space-based remote sensing policy of India. And I'd like to, get more details on that. And so may I request Dr. Subrat Das to please touch upon this, and how do you see the space RS policy 2020, and Can you share more insight on the objectives and the salient features, particularly of this policy? Dr. Das?
You have to unmute.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
See, satellite remote sensing is one of the quickest and the affordable technique for carrying out the development activities within the government or in the private sector. And the central government mostly uses the remote sensing data for regional level planning and for formulations of various projects at a national level. But when you see the state government, they have to really implement this, the project, the various projects, and there the high resolution satellite data, probably at a scale of 1:4K, that is at a cadastral level scale, is required for planning and execution of the various projects. Now, with this new policy, which allows the 50 centimeter data to be used for the execution of the project without any prior permission or approval of procuring the data or using the data. And moreover, when you talk about the salient feature, it promotes the industries and the startups to carry out the space-based remote sensing activity. Now here the space-based word is used. I will be coming later to point out some of the other aspects of the high resolution satellite data, which are described as the sensitive data also here.
Right.
So here the industries and the startup are allowed to carry out the remote sensing activities because right from the generation of the satellite to the output generation or the value added product which can be handed over directly to the government for implementation or execution. Now here, once this 0.5 meter satellite data is opened for the is made open, the demand will be previously also the demand was there for execution scale data, but now the private players can very well come in and they can acquire the data or procure the data and build up and bridge up the various gaps which are there. They can also provide an end-to-end solution for the government right from the inception to the executions. Now the government of the day requires basically the output, and here the private players can come in, put in some of their intelligence in the AI and ML analysis of the satellite data, because these are very high resolution data and requires a lot of space. So they will be in a good position to fill up all the gaps wherever the government is requiring it for the different projects. Also, as we have said that the 0.5 meter data is now can be accessed through web and it is open. That means also it has said that the previous means the coarser resolution data, that is 0.5 meter, 1 meter, 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. These data are also previously also it was open, but now the Indian remote sensing satellite data will be free, will be made freely available to the various users. Now any of the vendors who is developing any of the applications on this particular high resolution satellite data can provide these services to any of the government agencies or the private agencies, or they can give it as a services also. Now, this policy also envisages that the realization of the remote sensing activities with effective, affordable, and reliable technologies for a long-term solutions will be encouraged, and the various app development or the application development with respect to various thematics will be encouraged, and the R&D will be done also by both by Department of Space or also the private companies can chip in here. It also says about formulation of the committees which will be used, basically the InSpace, which will be the responsive for regulatory environment and for quick clearance, and because as you will be seeing, I have little experience of execution of the high resolution satellite data. And though previously a lot of permissions was to be sought, but now it is not there. But then as you go from 50 centimeter to 30 centimeter resolution data, lot of regulations will come in picture, and the policy promises that this sort of clearances and regulation will be cleared from time to time very quickly. Finally, I want to close with saying that it is a very open policy for private people to create space assets. Space assets means you can create a satellite, you can launch it, you can monitor it, and you can receive the data, that is the receiving station, you can process it, and you can add the value-added services, and then you can make the outputs so that it can be utilized directly by the government. So these sort of informations, and here the facilities will be there, like the dedicated satellites can also be now integrated, made, and then it can be established as a part of the data acquiring specifically for certain themes like agriculture, urban, disaster, with a different resolution. Of course, agriculture doesn't require this sort of large resolution, but then these can be manipulated, or it can be, the resolution can be manipulated, and the periodicity can be changed by the various satellite vendors to provide a better satellite data for analysis and for different activities of the government. One observation which I has, that this particular policy doesn't include the aerial and the drone data, which is also a high resolution satellite data, but though they have been put under the sensitive class of the data, but then how they can be acquired, though there are separate, I suppose the policies will be coming, and the drone policies are now there with us, which liberalizes many of the acquisition. But then I would request that the policy should also says that the integration of these data with the high resolution satellite data in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Das. Mr. Parial, I'd like to ask you and go beyond a little what Dr. Das and Lieutenant General Bhatt explained in terms of the role of the organizations, and Dr. Das touched upon the nuances of the technical nuances of the data when we move from 0.5 to 0.3. So as you have been a massive user of geospatial data at the chips and also at NEA Raipur Smart City project and the power sector. So as a user organization, how do you react to these policy initiatives and the changes? And do you see this will make it easier for organizations, including the private sector, to use geospatial information?
Yeah, good afternoon. Basically, as a practitioner or a user of such kind of a technologies, these are really path-breaking, and it was long awaited, I would say. As a user, if I see the key takeaways, which I see is it has reduced that ambiguity. So it has, the very first thing is it has the sunset policy, that all earlier procedures and guidelines and all these things, they stop, they cease to exist. That is a very big thing, because when you are actually focusing on a project, you don't want to be bothered about, okay, you have to refer this department, that department, this policy, that policy. That's a big pain. So that's a very big thing to begin with. Second is that ease of working. When you say that you don't need former initial approvals, and even the self-certification is good to begin with. So that sets the pace of that particular project. So even with as a government agency, whenever we were executing such kind of projects, so taking approvals, coordinating with multiple departments, that becomes a project in itself. So that's a key takeaway. Second is that servicing and strategic framework. That is the second part of the thing which I would like to touch upon. It clearly says these are the negative attributes, and it is already clear. and that will be published in time to time. And so that's very clear. And if your project is not touching or infringing on those things, so then you are good to go. Another thing which it is bringing in, that is basically the framework or the how this data will be shared, how private parties can be brought in. So that framework and the threshold for the spatial accuracy, that if right now, yes, it is about 50 centimeters, but later on, as and when it will be required and it will be demanded by different government agency, government organizations, and they are open to for revisions and those things. So this basically brings in lot of ease of doing. There is a servicing and strategic framework is already there. The last thing is about the security and data privacy. So it clearly talks about that, how the whole thing, your data can be stored, how the imageries can be stored, who can do what, who cannot do what. These are all there. It talks about how even the foreign agency or the companies which are of foreign origins, or what all Indian companies can do. That crystal clear policy is right now in frame. That will bring in lot of excitement among the industry, as well as the State Department or Indian organization which are into planning, and they are into smart cities, and all these projects will definitely be benefited. And it is a long awaited and clearly a very good time ahead.
Thank you.
You are on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Parial. As you pointed out, this was a long-awaited policy change, and which brings in more clarity in different roles, how data can be utilized, how it can be acquired, and most importantly, you said that even as a government organization, you were facing access issues, and so the next question is to Barry, actually. So Barry, what is your perspective of the steps taken by India to unlock the space sector? And from what Mr. Parial said, to democratize the entire geospatial technologies. And what do you think would be the socio-economic benefit, and what can we expect?
Yeah, thank you. So generally, it's a very positive perspective. I mean, satellite imagery and geospatial technology are really taking on a larger role, really on a global scale. And governmental organizations rely more and more on Earth observation technology. It really serves as a cost-effective, unbiased, time, but also location-aware source of information. So from my perspective, you know, it's great seeing the new Indian Space Association really being there for pushing exactly this public-private partnerships, while also really advocating for the policies that essentially utilize the space technologies. And as a growing member of the community here and an active member in the community, we're definitely excited to be seeing more of these initiatives that essentially drive the demand, the usage, but then ultimately also the adoption of geospatial technology. With UP42, and this really aligns very nicely, we fundamentally believe in democratizing access to geospatial technology, to data, to analytics, and the underlying infrastructure. And this for me is really a key driver of innovation. And it has also been mentioned before. And innovation is going to come from within the industry, but I believe that we will also see a lot of innovative ideas and new ideas actually really coming from industries outside of it. And to kind of bridge this again, this really is at the core of our mission, right? So lowering the commercial and technical barriers to really ensure a more streamlined and simplified way of accessing geospatial technology, working with the data, working with analytics, and bringing all of these together in one place. And essentially, it's a very powerful approach and potentially solution to the world's most significant challenges. Again, we do recognize and really appreciate the Indian government's efforts to be creating this more collaborative ecosystem that brings together public and private sector. And I believe that this really is key in spearheading the country in that domain to really benefit its economy and the people.
Thanks a lot, Barry. You touched upon the collaborative role between the private and the government sector, and we have with us Agendra Kumar, who has been for long advocated for the PPP in the sector. So, Mr. Kumar, how does the policy change impact organizations like Esri and other private sector players? Particularly, I'm asking this since India's experience with PPP in the sector has not really been good.
Yeah, thank you, Shubhendu, and good afternoon to all my fellow panelists and participants. Public-private partnership is a very important model which has worked very well in many sectors, and of course in geospatial it is new, and we have not really seen so many benefits of public-private partnership models in the geospatial sector. But if we look at a very simple example, which is about highway constructions, we have seen it being very successful in India. There are so many projects where construction companies or large construction companies or other private organizations, they made upfront investment and collected that investment back in terms of fee charged for the usage of the road, which was the asset created as a part of this partnership.
Right.
Now, if you compare this scenario with the geospatial scenario, one big difference is that when you're looking at a traffic on a highway, you have an idea how many automobiles are going to cross every day and what is the money you can get back. So the ROI is very easy to arrive at. That if I'm investing, say, $100 million, how much time will it take for me to recover 100 and how much profit I can make after that? So those kind of easy calculations are available. In terms of geospatial data, value of data is not that easy to calculate. It's not easy to calculate that if you create a data, how many people are going to use it. Often the value which is derived out of geospatial data is enormous, but it may not be in terms of direct rupees or dollars. Why I say so? I say so because my colleague, Dr. Das, mentioned about disaster management, use of geospatial technologies and data in disaster management. And we have seen country doing very well in this area. If you go back 15 or 20 years ago, and if there would be a cyclone, we'll probably lose 10, 15, 20,000 people in that cyclone. A lot of investment was done using geospatial technologies, and areas were identified where people should be moved and what other steps should be taken. And there's a better prediction of cyclone or other disasters. Now, as a result of that, today, if there is a cyclone, we typically lose about a single digit lives, like 5, 10, something like that. So can you put a value to human life? No, you can't really put a value to human life, but the benefit that we have derived is enormous. Similarly, the efficiencies which can be gained by implementing a smart city project or managing our utilities better, in some cases we can calculate the value. In some cases, the value to the human being, to the citizens, is so large that it's not really possible to put a dollar amount to that. Now, there are areas where investment is required. When we create a data in this scenario, it'll be extremely difficult to get private organizations to make an investment of creating that data upfront. So what we need is government organizations at all levels, whether these are national mapping agencies or these are other bodies which are under Department of Space or various other state level departments, that effort to create that data is really very important, because if we do not have that data, then country's development and progress that we are talking about will not happen. So if government takes an initiative of putting investment in that area, private sector can help in speedier execution and getting the right outcomes. First, in terms of data creation, and after you create data, there are a number of applications, there are a number of benefits which can be derived by that investment which we are making. Now, there also the large private sector can come together with the government organizations in implementing the solutions or applications in various sectors, starting from disaster management, utilities, both in terms of gas distribution, electricity distribution, water distribution, which are very, very important areas. All three are very important. Then talking about agriculture, talking about land records management. All these areas are very important where geospatial technologies and the content, whether it is a content created from remote sensing or otherwise, all that can play a very, very important role and really help in creating an economic value and growing the economy of the country, especially on the remote sensing side. As we have General Bhatt and Dr. Das, both are from remote sensing area. And I think government's clarity, some level of clarity has come in the remote sensing data policy. I think there's more clarity in terms of whether you can launch a satellite, what you can do with that, who can launch, how you can collaborate with ISRO. But so far as the remote sensing data is concerned, we only have a draft policy still with us. The final policy has not come out, and industry is waiting quite eagerly. And we hope that that policy will be well synced up with the geospatial data policy, data guidelines, which were released by Department of Science and Technology. Because unless we have a seamless policy environment for both geospatial data and remote sensing data, it will be difficult for all the users, whether they are in government sector or private sector, to get maximum value from all this geospatial content which will be available.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. And before we touch upon more in terms of the usage in India, I'd like to understand from Barry. And Barry, could you quickly touch upon the scenario in other Asian countries so that we get a comparison vis-a-vis India, and how well are businesses in other Asian countries placed, and how well they are using geospatial technologies?
Sure. So within a recent report by the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, was actually outlined that many countries in the APEC region have already been taking significant steps towards the integration of geospatial data into their national policies and strategies as well. And I think this already as early as 2005, where I believe that Indonesia has actually been one of the first countries to really be developing a long-term national plan through 2025. And since the geospatial technology is rapidly growing, these countries are also opening up into international cooperations. And at the same time, they're really proving that the socioeconomic benefits are really pursued on a global level and with a very strong commitment behind them. And yeah, from our perspective, as Asia is already widely recognized as a growing hub for innovative startups, the establishment of this collaborative geospatial ecosystem is actually a very, very strong proof that the country is not only ready, but actually fully invested into that sector already.
Thanks. Thank you, Barry. Mr. Kumar, you have been interacting with a lot of companies. You already shared a lot in terms of the usage and the disaster management part and the role of PPP, the private sector players. So, but a little more, I would want to understand that how ready are different government agencies, and we are getting the policy in place, but are the companies and agencies ready in terms of using it and driving innovation using this data?
Yes, I think organizations both in government and private sector are ready. They have been ready for a long time, and they have been using these technologies and content for a very long time. I mean, Esri India as a company, we have been here for 25 years, and we work with more than 5,000 organizations in government sector in the country, and many of them have been doing work which is comparable with anywhere else in the world. Of course, due to some policy constraints, things used to slow down, because if one had to buy 50 centimeter data or 30 centimeter remote sensing data, there's a process of approval, and it takes like 9 months or a year it's been taking. With the changed policy environment, this is going to be much faster. Similarly, collection of data by survey or other ground survey and other means. Also, there were a lot of permissions required, and there was lack of clarity that that what can be approved, what cannot be approved, and all those things. But at least on that side, because of the new data, geospatial data guidelines, things have become easier, and a lot of people are able to create new data both in government and private sector and make use. So to answer your question, yes, country has been ready, country is ready, and as much data or technology we can pump in, people will make use of that. I have seen on government side, there are in almost all government large programs, whether it's Digital India or it is programs under Jal Shakti, or you call it Namami Gange, or smart city programs or Amrit city programs, uh, uh, country planning, city planning and mapping activities, and a lot of government organizations like regional remote sensing centers, state planning departments. They've all been using geospatial technology quite a lot, and there have been some very innovative applications which directly touch people, citizens of the country. For example, there was a very popular application, very important application, which was created using GIS technology for a direct benefit transfer. So it really impacted huge amount of people. You mentioned about use of technology in COVID management. I think it's really helped people and government agencies in managing such a disaster of such a magnitude so easily using these technologies. In private sector, we've seen a lot of manufacturing organizations, logistic companies, telecommunication companies, other private utilities. I mean, many of them have been using this technology very successfully, and the better policy environment will only speed up the utilization and the benefit that they can derive out of these technologies.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. So as we, just to sum up what we have discussed, we have the policy in place and the intent is there, though some of the policy is in a draft stage. Barry also touched upon how Asia, the other Asian countries have been focusing in a big way. He talked about Indonesia. Mr. Kumar has just mentioned that India has always been, for long, been ready for this. So, Mr. Das, Dr. Das, ISRO has been playing a major role in this space, and I would want to understand and get more insight into what ISRO is doing to make this enable easy access to space-based data to organizations in India, and also maybe because it's one of the biggest agencies and one of the leaders in the world, to the other Asian countries. Dr. Das?
I have unmuted. Oh, okay. Sorry. If you see, ISRO has been doing a lot of projects, and ISRO has a wealth of the satellite data, as well as the thematic map, which have been derived from these satellite data over the years. And there are some census project, some IMSD project, NRIS project, NR census, land degradation projects have been there. Now, NR census tells that we are going to do our land mapping after every 5 years, and we can see the changes which are happening in that. So the volume of the satellite data and the derived output has already been put into the Bhuvan platform for the dissemination for the viewers to view it. Presently, it cannot be downloadable, but with the new policy coming in, ISRO is planning already. There is a Bhunidhi platform is there, where you can download the various remote sensing satellite data previously acquired freely through this portal. And the new arrivals of the data, new data which will be coming from the remote sensing satellites, will also be made available in the coming days, when by heart and soul this policy is being implemented. Also, the policy is also mentions that the 5 meter and above data should be freely available to it. And ISRO is planning to provide all these satellite data free of cost to the various users in a downloadable format. The Bunidhi platform also allows you to download the various free data which are available in the world, like Sentinel, Landsat data, also under the one platform itself. ISRO is also having some other platforms like Vedas and Mosdak, wherein the value-added products and the, I would say, the archival product over the years, thematic products which are generated to see the change reduction which is happening over the years are already present in Vedas, but they are not in the downloadable format. But hopefully, with the new policy coming in and the more effort going into these data will be made available to the various users. Similarly, you have Mosdak also, where the weather data are also available, archival data, as well as the future data, which or the some predictive data are also been put into the Mosdak website. So these are some of the efforts which the ISRO is already there. But with the new policy coming here, the data will be downloadable in different format. In the I would say it has mentioned that as is varies, data will be made available to the various users.
Thank you, Dr. Das. I'd like to understand from Lieutenant General Bhatt, since your organization is kind of a bridge between the government policymakers and playing a role for the vendors, the service providers in the space, and so you have a big role to play in terms of defining the user perspective. So what are the geospatial and what are the areas do you think focused in India where geospatial insight can provide a competitive edge in terms of operational advantages, and particularly how does adding the locational context help? I'd like to understand this from you, sir.
As you know, location context is very essential for all applications which are addressing the change monitoring, be it in agriculture, be it in insurance, be it in disaster management, national security, infrastructure planning and monitoring, and of course the oil and gas sector, and most importantly in the transport industry. Everywhere, location control context is a very, very important domain to get this information, which can be utilized in a very efficient manner. And in emerging domains, including the autonomous mobility solutions which are being looked at in the future, and augmented reality, this will become a fundamental requirement in the geospatial context. The availability of accurate, updated, and that is why what location context does is gives you updations. Geospatial information will be essential for all emerging technologies. And in India, where we have a very large size, a large population and hence clients, accurate, updated geospatial data is essential, and this can be done by scaling the space technology.
Thank you. Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. And I would just give one example is a simple thing like dial 100, which the police uses. Is this service, if location context is added to it, the response in emergency will become far, far better. It'll reach 3 levels higher.
Understood, sir. And Mr. Kumar also talked about the disaster management part of it is the response time, as you mentioned. Yeah. It could add the fire services, we can say, and the NDRF can look at these things. So definitely, what you said is makes a lot of sense. There's one interesting thing I'd like to understand, and especially from Mr. Parial, because he has been handling data, he's doing data analytics, and also he's an AI expert. Businesses are already using a multitude of data from ERP, CRM, social media, mobile application platforms. So how do you see the information from the OT, DT, and GT converging in the days to come? Mr. Parial.
On a lighter note, I would say that we have never seen ants bumping onto each other. We have never seen honeybees queuing up in front of a flower for pollen. But if you go to any of Indian cities or you are driving on any Indian city, you will find people bumping onto each other. There is a queue. So yes, we need those institutional. Whenever you are handling these kind of projects and you are on the other side, so what you need is that clear institutional framework where you know exactly which door you need to knock. So there are clearly two players, which basically is, one is of course ISRO, and second is Survey of India. This policy, in a way, I appreciate that it has set up the tone about the right door and the institutional framework. There are 4 or 5 key things which they have limited, how this all can be easily made accessible to a common user. The second thing they are talking about the pricing. One good take for a government organization is many things they are saying now it will be available free of cost to the government organization, but even for a private or any other user, it will be available with a transparent pricing. Otherwise, nobody knew how, from where to procure and what should be the costing. Budgeting itself was a different project. Simplification of the procedures, that is again something which has been, and top of it, it is talking about how even a continuous user using modern technologies, like it is talking about open APIs, cloud infrastructure, and even at a cache server, how it can be accessed. All these things are already there. And one of the biggest thing which I would like Mr. Das, he knows how difficult it was. This is about the standard. Even if you are a logistic company, or if you are into automobiles, or you have a distribution channel, or if you are planning for a e-commerce delivery, or you want to open a new store, you don't know how the rural market or rural address work. One example which Mr. Kumar gave is about dial 112. The person on the other side, he is mentioning about a name of a village, but you don't know which village, because he says he such and such post office. Somebody says my village comes under, my village can be identified by a particular thana. It can be a panchayat, or it can be a patwari halka. Somebody even mentioned about the Elia's name. This village is known by some Naya Para or something like that. When we were integrating things for the Chhattisgarh state, so ultimately to identify a village, we have to even go for the census code and blend the data. So there are so many ways those data needs to be handled, and that data culture needs to come up. Once the Survey of India boundaries and all those things, that policy says that will be the new standard, and that will bring in or take away do lot of demystification and bring in lot of unambiguity, so that that means I would say that there is a indirect benefit, that lot of the rural area which is right now is unserved, or that market is untapped, that is going to throw open to each and every industry. This is going to be a big thing. So probably if you are driving a car, you will see in a near future that in an accident prone area or an accident hotspot, your car is slowing down automatically, or your seat belt with the IoT device, if it senses that something is wrong with your health, it will guide you to the nearest hospital. It's going to be that beautiful. So this is the new India which we will be seeing very soon.
Thank you, Mr. Parial. You talked about the culture, you talked about the clarity in policy that will help in integrating. From the technology perspective, I'd like to understand from Mr. Kumar that how organizations can integrate these data sets. And does it require a major change in the way an organization works? Yeah.
Well, the change it requires is in terms of thinking and realization that most of the data which exists in any private organization also has a location component attached with that. You look at the data which is in SAP, you look at the data which is in any financial system, look at the data which is in any HR system. Your employees have location, your vendors have location, your distributors, dealers, customers, everyone has location. So it's the only realization that once you are able to harness the power of that location which is attached with the data, then the value you can realize out of your data can be enormously large for you. Retail organizations use that to give targeted messages to their clients, setting up better, setting up new outlets, depending on what kind of people live in that area, what could be the demand. In fact, in rural areas, we have also seen that some of the automobile companies assess the demand in rural area, and then they set up a distribution or retail outlets there, so that they have an idea that, okay, what is the demand going to be? Similarly, in urban areas, what kind of vehicles should be sold or what kind of other consumer goods should be sold? There are a lot of analytics which happens. And a lot of organizations during COVID, they use the same technology to open offices, to let employees come or not come. Employees were advised the driving path based on, so that they can avoid the red zones when we have red zones across the country. So a lot of such applications have been used, and it is very easy to integrate. We don't really have to overhaul the entire IT in order to use the geospatial power of geospatial technology in any organization.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Kumar. We are already at 4 o'clock, but I'll still take 10 minutes. I hope you guys are okay with that. So, Barry, Mr. Kumar and Mr. Parial talked about the different kind of data sets and how there's a paradigm shift in terms of data. And he talked about the IoT and how the car may automatically stop in a busy zone or a zone where there is a speed limit. So just wanted to understand from a company perspective, from a technology company perspective, and as a technologist, what are you doing to shift this business paradigm of data?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I mean, a lot of interesting things have been mentioned around, standards and kind of the mindset and the exploration of data. I mean, with all of these policies and all of the ways that we're democratizing the access to data and we're opening up that access, we're also seeing quite some challenges that arise from that. And one challenge clearly is the sheer amount of data. Like if you think about all of the remote sensing data in terms of satellite constellations, but then also in terms of other data sets that have this geo-reference attached to it, it's just a massive amount of data. And there's parts of it where it's around the exploration of different data sets and capabilities and use cases. And then there's also the part of being able to really analyze that data and derive, insights that can then really inform businesses about critical decisions that need to be taken. So from an Up 42 perspective, that is the part where we basically come in and we're trying to push for the ease of exploration. We're in terms of the data side, we're working together with partners from the industry to showcase the data, to showcase the different capabilities, and to make it very easy to access that data. We're actually doing the same for analytics, because a lot of the analytics systems and tools, and especially processing algorithms, they're kind of reinvented. Like everyone is trying to build some things of the full processing chain, and they're getting reinvented, and there is no easy way of basically sharing these technological assets. And that's something that we as a platform we're offering. So we have the combination of data processing, full processing algorithms and chains, and also the underlying infrastructure. And here we're operating on basically a pay-as-you-go model to really ease also this commercial barrier that we see in the industry. And generally from the data side, I mean, it was already been mentioned that you have the data, but you also need to have some sets of processing algorithms attached to it to be able to derive these insights. We do really believe in machine learning and artificial intelligence, especially given the amount of data that is out there. But again, here there's also an understanding that needs to happen in terms of what things are these technologies not able to solve out of the box, and what things actually need tweaking so that we have the right results and we can gain the right insights.
Thanks, Perry. And just to sum it up, I'd like quick, responses from all the speakers. Starting with Lieutenant General Bhatt, could you please share 2 real-world challenges that geospatial data and insight can help solve? You already talked about the emergency number, but other than that, and do you see any, and also 3 initial steps that an organization should take to move into this or adopt and start using the geospatial data? So starting with Lieutenant General Bhatt.
To list the place where challenges can be met, in all the domains I've spoken of: disaster management, environmental control, conservation, logistics services, transportation, river basin managements, natural resource management, forests, water, minerals, everywhere you can use it. But what are the 3 steps which you asked me? And one most important one is make geospatial data the foundation of basic planning and decision making. This is a culture which has to be there in all government agencies, in the private enterprise, because it will save money, it will make it more efficient, and it will be one of the great uses of it. The second is we have to do capacity building to exploit data, starting from universities where people learn, and these skills, especially in a country like India, are required to a large extent. And we have to believe that space technology is a source of truth. Like a picture, it gives you information which is truth, it has to be analyzed, and it has to be optimally used.
Thank you. Mr. Kumar, 2 real-world challenges that the geospatial data and insight can help solve, and 3 initial steps that an organization needs to take.
Well, 2 real-world challenges, I would say it can do a lot in terms of climate change and sustainability, and solving some of the problems like water scarcity that the world is facing today. And in a country like India, the second one I would say is improving the quality of life for citizens. Something which as a country we are trying to address through smart city mission and some similar programs. I think that a lot more can be done to improve in that area. In terms of what we need is, I think I second what General Bhatt mentioned about capacity. I think one challenge we have in the country is when a student comes out of engineering college, or somebody comes out with another degree, their employability is still very low. They're not ready to really work, and a lot of handholding is required at that time. So if we can improve the curriculum at university level and improve the quality of education, it'll go a long way. I think after that, the other thing which I would mention is that better collaborations between different organizations. We need not try to do everything on our own. Everybody has some strengths. We should leverage on each other's strengths and try to build on that and make use of those things. And third one, I think use of technology. There are so many new things which are coming up, whether we look at IoT integration or AI/ML or drones. We are getting a lot of tools and techniques. I think we should just make use of whatever comes our way, and All these are good. All these are very useful, and that will give us enormous benefit if we keep using those. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parial, 2 real-world challenges and 3 initial steps that an organization needs to take.
Yeah, we all know the benefits of farm being near to the farmer. But when we talk about any city, so I was advisor for a smart city. We know that none of our city where we can even imagine that we can cycle or walk to work. So any kind of a city planning or alternative to slums or freeing of a public value, which is something where most of Indian cities are right now struggling so badly, or so many disputes are all around the farming available lands. So that is one area where this particular policy and the way private sectors has been enabled are going to be enormously benefited. Second is all the commercial organizations. So there is a saying that from inner circle to the winner circle. So how you can utilize the geospatial data to be on the periphery, how you can actually pinpoint the location where you can have value. It can be you want to set up a new logistic hub, or you are looking for a new place to start your factory. These are all can pretty easily be done by GIS data. Right now, that framework or that kind of infrastructure was not there. So we need to think about the spatial data infrastructure. And secondly, one small thing where also the Indian companies and everybody involved in these things need to understand is the edge level, the fog level, or the cloud level. What kind of a security and what kind of a challenge and declogging which will be required. That is again where some kind of a challenge may come, but definitely the kind of a startup and private sector enthusiasm, I'm personally very optimistic about all these things.
And 3 steps, would you like to touch upon that and advise to organization on how 3 initial steps?
Definitely. First is, of course, how you can blend the data, what kind of infrastructure you need to actually consume geospatial data, and how you are able to benefit from the APIs and the data which government is opening up. That understanding and that internal brainstorming, every company, every organization needs to do.
Thank you. Barry, your final words on 2 real-world challenges and 3 initial steps.
I mean, it's actually pretty hard to be only naming 2 kind of real-world challenges. Huh? Geospatial technology and data is really able to solve a lot of things and to be a good support system. So for me, I guess I'll stick with agriculture and kind of the infrastructure monitoring use cases, where on the agriculture side, I mean, geospatial technology has actually been really proving that it's a very valuable support system. If we think about crop monitoring, kind of the health monitoring, increasing yields, and also kind of optimizing the fertilization processes, which ultimately then also is there for saving resources and supporting environmental cases as well. The infrastructure monitoring part, because to me it's just a very interesting one, and it's very present, and we do talk about railway networks, we do talk about power lines and utility networks. And the interesting part here is that this is a use case that is also really on a very large scale. If we think about the networks and the size, where geospatial technology can really pinpoint kind of risk areas and can really, enable companies and corporations to move faster on identifying those risks and really have actionable insights on moving forward. The 3 steps for companies that I believe need to be taken, I'd say the first is exploration, and I guess it has been mentioned in different words before, where it's around exploring the different data sets, exploring the different capabilities, revisits the frequency, resolution, and some of the potential options on how it basically can be blended into the data that is already available. But then this also goes further for us in terms of exploration on the processing algorithms. What kind of technology is readily available that we can reuse, so we can move to my next point, which is building proof of concepts, right? It's kind of the next logical step where you would be trying to build a proof of concept that maybe is not 100%, but that already gives you a very good perspective on the feasibility of your projects and the technical capabilities that you would need. And then at the end, you can really move into this automation aspect, where it's then about productionizing your system and automating it so that it really scales with the needs that you essentially have as well. And I want to close with the perspective from Up42, because this is really something that we see in a lot of conversations when we're working together with companies that are trying to get geospatial technology into their systems and into their processes, where it really starts with the exploration, kind of the information gathering, trying to build the proof of concept to then really be able to productionize their system and to scale their system accordingly.
Thanks a lot, Barry. Dr. Das, your final words.
Yeah. See, I would talk about the generation of the base map with the high resolution satellite data, because that is a big challenge now. I suppose only the government of Maharashtra has taken up this challenge, and they have successfully been implementing the various projects into this high resolution satellite data with 2 scale of the vector data, 2K scale of vector data. Now the challenges will be basically to have the currency of this data. Now, the currency will come with the acquisition process and the processing of this particular data. And finally, once you come up with the challenges of the acquisition and then processing, you create a nearly fairly near real-time data. You will be having the challenge of integrating them with the cadastral system, because I feel that if you integrate them perfectly with the high resolution satellite data with the cadastral system, 50%, I would say sometimes 70 to 80% of the problems will be solved of the country with respect to the land acquisition and other conflicts. Second challenge will be very important is with the data. I say that we have a challenge to come out of my data to our data. See, presently we are all holding our data. We are keeping it with that, telling that these are the security issues, many things are there, but then the data are to be used. Unless and until it is used, it has no meaning at all. So we have a challenge of coming out from my data to our data. Frankly speaking, if you are talking about how to solve these informations, I would say that we should talk about one data. One data, I mean that one base data on which all other data should stack up. We should have a robust API to serve this data. And we should have a very strong and very substantially, I would say, good standard to back up this and create this data. And finally, to integrate these all data together in various apps. I would also suggest that the various apps should be also integrated with one another. We have all separate apps performing various different tasks of the same department of the government. Finally, because this is basically for the nation, so that both of the private industries, startups, and the government should come up to achieve this particular goal. And I hope that once we create our base properly, it will be very easy going for all of us in this particular geospatial endeavor. Thank you.
So any advice to the organization, 2 or 3 steps that they should take to initiate this, the use of geospatial data in their organization? Initial steps.
Yeah, they have. See, what my experience says that for the state government implementation of the project, the high resolution satellite data is a must, because their requirement is like that. They plan, they execute, and then they monitor what are the execution has taken up. So the State Department has to take up this particular proper method of making a very accurate base map first, and then executing all the project over this base map.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Das. And thank you all speakers, Lieutenant General Bhatt, Mr. Agendra Kumar, Mr. A.M. Parial, Mr. Barry Nagel, and Dr. Das for making it such an interactive session and walking us through the different aspect of the policy, the impact of geospatial technology on businesses. You, all of you brought in some interesting use cases, from a car being automated or controlled during a busy street to 100 number, and to agriculture, as Barry pointed out, and healthcare, and also the impact of the change in government policy in India. We understand that the Earth observation data and insight can really be a game changer for business and economy, and as pointed out. And we understand that the key is not just to focus on technology, but to put the right tools and information in the hands of the stakeholders. And as a step, exploration of the data, getting the right set of data, and then building the proof of concept before the companies and even the state governments, as Dr. Das pointed out, goes into the full-scale rollout. So with this, on behalf of Business Transformation Asia and GEC Media Group, I thank all of you again and all the participants who joined us today. And I'll really happy to inform you all that today's webinar will be available as video on demand on our YouTube channel, so that you can watch it again and maybe share if you like it. And with this, signing off now, I'm Shubhendu Parth, your host for today's webinar. Stay home, stay safe, and of course, keep reading Business Transformation Asia. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of GEC Media and Business Transformation Asia.